I took this title from the author, and we have talked extensively about the meaning of this. First of all, Ernest Hemingway wrote a book called Men Without Women, and this was the author's response to Hemingway. But this film and this novel is really not a project of women against men. It's about women who cannot cope with men. And I believe that was the same thing in Hemingway's book, where it was not men who hated women, but men who couldn't deal with women. So you'll see in many of the characters, men are present in their lives. Sometimes are very positive characters, and sometimes not so positive. But regardless, it is not about them. It's about women who, on their journey, in a way, without men, in their transformative journey of where their problem begins and ends, they're independent from the men. So it's really about that. It's not like a feminist positioning in this project for me.
I looked at your previous work, like the photographs of women of Allah, and I felt like I was watching these women with the calligraphy on their faces or on their hands. I felt like religion or the culture was placed on them. And what is your opinion? Can we choose to put the religion aside and our culture aside when we need to and stand as individuals, or is it something that it's placed on us and we have to deal with it as we grow older?
I think that, in, like I was explaining, in cultures like in Iran or Greece or many other cultures that are very ancient cultures, and religion has always played a big role. Of course, the degrees of religiosity has changed. Like, for example, in Iran, we were a religious community, but not like the way it was after the Islamic Revolution, where the question of choice in relation to religion has been lifted. So I think, for example, I consider myself somewhat of a religious person in a way that I use some ideas of faith in guiding me through life. But in other ways, I think when, the idea of religion is enforced on you and it becomes oppressive, then it's a completely different connotation. So my work sort of works in both ways. Those who really believe in the faith and deliberately do what they, including terrorism or, like in the Women of Allah, those women are actually militant because they have this conviction for their religion. But then I have other projects and films and characters who are oppressed by religion. And I can speak of a number of them. So I try not to really take sides, but to show how religion can work in different ways on people's subconscious.
You live in America, in the United States. Would you consider yourself an American now?
I consider myself Iranian American. I feel, particularly since Obama was elected, I feel more American than I did before. I have to say that before that, I had a hard time even making myself believe I'm an American other than my passport. But truly, I feel much more of a part of the community now. And proud of being American. But I always explain that my emotionality, the foundation of my character is Iranian, and my more educational, intellectual character it's a very Western and very American. So I'm kind of divided in that way, but I would say I'm Iranian American.
And since you mentioned Obama, how do you think can the relationship, if they can, between the two countries improve in the future?
Well, I, for the first time, feel optimistic. I think many of us in the world had given up in the idea that there would be any leadership that would really move toward a more democratic and more peaceful direction. And I think it's an immensely, wonderful surprise that the world inherits Obama for whatever reason. And I think in some ways, without a doubt, he would extend his hand for negotiation. And now it would be interesting to see how Iran would respond. But not to say that this is not a complex situation. And I understand that I probably look at it way more simplistic than I should be. But naively, I really hope, and particularly because we have election in Iran this June, and Obama's attention to Iran, that I'm hoping that things will take a better turn for all of us, including Iranians who are living outside, who really wish to be able to, reunify with their country. So I think the next few months are very critical in terms of how this relationship will develop.
You mentioned you're sort of in self-exile. You went to the States originally to study, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. Do you communicate with members of your family in Iran? Do you miss them? Are they able to travel and see you in the States?
Well, it's been difficult because not only I have a difficult time going to Iran, they have a difficult time coming to the U.S. because they need visas, and the American government doesn't extend visas very easily to Iranian citizens. So we have to always find ways to meet in between. And so, there's been this huge gap between me and my family, and I'm not the only one. So, I mean, this grief has been shared by many Iranians that have been divided because of the revolution. So it's been nevertheless painful, and perhaps the very foundation of why I'm an artist and why I make the work I do in some ways to be able to face my own anxieties and pain as an Iranian who is away, and by making this work I feel a steps closer to my own country.
And I'm going to take you back to your work because now you're going to be considered by a lot of people, either a film director after your film has a wider release. You've said in interviews that you've been inspired or affected by work of Tarkovsky and Wong Kar-wai. How have they affected your work as a
Well,
visual artist?
I think in different directors have affected me different ways. For example, with Tarkovsky, because he has this profound philosophical moral value in his work, that while it's incredibly beautiful visually, it's very painterly, it's just astonishing image after image after image, it has a strong footing in a philosophical message in a way that it really, at least in my personal experience, it really transformed me as a person, but also as someone who now can believe that art can make such an impact on a human being and can change you in the way that you look at the world and your own existence. I think Tarkovsky has an impact on me that I think no other visual artist has ever had. And to me, he is a visual artist. Every frame of his films, to me, are just profound and beautiful in every dimension. So, and perhaps it's also the fact that he's Russian and the fact that I sympathize and identify with some of the issues that he's focusing on, that other younger countries or other countries that don't really have shared that experience of oppression, of the darkness that we experience in dictatorship, etc. Now, with Wong Kar-wai, I think it's purely visual terms and the musical way in which he goes about filmmaking. Of course, it's a younger and more experimental, and I have said, I really enjoy looking at his work frame by frame, merely by the way he just sort of takes your breath away in the way that he does carry the camera and cinematography, and the way he incorporates music and the storytelling. And I've had the pleasure of meeting him, and I think he's really a fascinating artist.